Awesome. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Thank you so much for joining us today. If you haven't joined Uptycs Live before, we have some really great stuff for you all. And thank you so much for joining us last month. We had a really great discussion. I encourage you to go check it out on the website. But this month, I'm very excited. We have Josh and Amanda on. We're going to talk about DFIR for the cloud. We're going to talk about detection response. So sit down, grab your cup of coffee. We'll get started in about 20 or 30 seconds. So, feel free to take a breath, and I see some people still trickling in. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Let's go ahead and get started. I see most people are in the call now. Amanda, you're the first guest. I'm really excited to have you on for the first time. Josh, you work at Uptycs. I'm really excited to have you on. Why don't you guys take a moment and introduce yourselves? Amanda from Blumira, go ahead, take it away.
Wait, I'm the first guest?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I feel
so
very
excited to have
happy.
you
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
Yeah.
Very honored. Yeah. So my name is Amanda Berlin. I'm the lead incident detection engineer at Blumira. I was here when the company started. I have a background in very large SIM environments in general, and then I kind of got my start in technology working at help desks. I worked like in the mid 2000s at ISP doing dial-up and DSL troubleshooting, and worked at a hospital for a long time doing help desk. And then I graduated onto everybody's favorite, like net admin, sysadmin, jack of all trades, and did that for quite some time. And then realized this whole time I was actually doing security, and then pivoted more into security space because I enjoyed that better than like taking CCNA tests.
That is awesome. Yeah, no, for those of you who don't know, Amanda has some incredible war stories and some really fun experiences that I'm excited for her to dig into. Her background and everything is fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us this month.
Yeah.
Josh, you recently joined us, kind of director of MDR here. You also have a pretty deep background in DFIR materials. Why don't you share a bit of your own background? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I started at Uptycs as the director for managed detection and response towards the end of last year. So basically taking some of the team that they already had and then building that out and just trying to scale that out to a larger team to kind of cater to a lot of the customers that Uptycs are doing MDR for. But my background prior to that is doing digital forensics and incident response for a number of years, both as an internal incident responder, so inside an organization where we were protecting the inside of the organization and all the data that they were holding, and then also from a consulting perspective. So I spent a lot of time doing consulting where I basically would go out and help organizations as well. And I've come from sort of a variety of backgrounds. I did consulting with a defense contractor for quite a long time, but I've worked in finance, and I've also worked in quite a large cloud company out of the US as well. And then if that's kind of not enough, in my spare time, I guess, that's not really spare time anymore. I'm also a SANS instructor and author of the cloud forensics class. As well. So I end up kind of traveling the globe and trying to teach people how to do the forensic stuff that I've kind of been doing for years as well. More nowadays with a bit more of a perspective on cloud forensics, only because that's fairly new and not only new, but continually changes almost on a monthly basis. So usually doing research or trying to teach people how to do forensics in that space as well.
No, that's wonderful. And hopefully you can share a few of your, teachings from SANS here and drop some nuggets of knowledge to the audience. So I'm really excited to dig into that. And I think what you mentioned about kind of focusing more on the cloud is really relevant for this topic area. So before we get into it all, some housekeeping items for everyone here. This webinar is expected to go around 30 minutes. We're going to spend around 10 or so minutes just doing this roundtable discussion with Amanda and Josh. And then Josh is going to walk us through a few of his methods for actually prioritizing alerts using a variety of different things, maybe the MITRE attack framework or the cyber kill chain. And then we'll talk about some actual tangible solutions for parsing through data and looking at digital forensics and analyzing these alerts themselves. And then we'll open it up at the end for about 5 minutes for an open Q&A. So the topic of today is really diving into digital forensics and incident response. We have a couple of experts here who really know what they're talking about and are able to translate some of the stuff that's really been well researched around traditional XDR and have started to move it into the cloud space. but you know, there's probably a couple people here who aren't familiar with what DFIR is or what incident response even looks like. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask was, you know, Josh, maybe just kind of provide this simple definition of what is DFIR for you, and what does the team kind of look like?
Yeah, sure. I think the challenge with DFIR is it continually changes on a bit of a regular basis. So I guess at the core part of it, DFIR, or digital forensics and incident response, is really, I think, sort of two areas kind of pushed together, and that's because they kind of work together quite a lot. So digital forensics is often the practice of going through evidence, and generally computer evidence, to try to understand what a threat actor or what someone has done that's often malicious activity. And it's not necessarily contained to just a laptop or a computer or a server, but it can also include things like mobile phones. I've also got friends of mine who do digital forensics on things like an Amazon Echo and a Google Homes, and cars and crazy things like that as well, which is well outside of my space of expertise. But basically, if you can pull like a digital artifact off an electronic device and analyze it, that is basically the practice of digital forensics, in short. And then there's also incident response, which is the IR part of DFIR. And that is more around, in the middle of an incident, you need to actually start to understand what has occurred or what is occurring inside an environment when you've got an active threat actor or someone being malicious in the moment, and then trying to understand where they've been and what they've done, and trying to get a plan around, all right, how do we get sort of our hands around this threat actor in a computer environment, and how do we kind of make a plan to try to evict them from that environment as well, and then prevent them from coming back. And those steps are part of incident response. But often incident response and digital forensics marry together quite well, because you want to understand what the threat actor has done, so you know how they got into the environment, and that what question is the forensics or the digital forensics part of it.
No, that's fantastic. And just to kind of lead this into you, Amanda, you know, maybe you can give a little background on what Blumira does, and if Blumira kind of sees the space the same, maybe a little differently. I'm curious your own definition of DFIR as well.
I mean, that was pretty much on the nose. I'm not sure if I can expound much on that. I've always thought it was interesting because I always look at it like IR and then data forensics, because usually IR happens first.
Yeah.
Right before you get to the data forensics part. But there are definitely a lot of differences between the two. So as far as Blumira, we try and make all of that really complicated, like scary SIM stuff easy. So I came, like I said, I worked at a larger SIM organization for a while, doing both consulting and like some internal stuff. And it takes forever, right? It can take forever to implement a SIM. Like when I came to Blumira, they wanted us to do it in under a week. Like that's not possible. You have to have like months and months of like tuning detections and onboarding and all this kind of stuff. Like it's this huge, complicated process. And now we can do it in like a couple hours. So they proved me wrong. So yeah, that's kind of like the elevator pitch. I'm not a great salesperson, but that's how I like to explain what we do. We kind of automate a bunch of the stuff that used to take a long time.
No, that's awesome. I think kind of one of the things we've talked about offline and you're hinting at here is like having the right data on hand to be able to address these alerts and uncover them and find them. And I'm kind of curious, maybe expanding upon it a little bit, but just like when you come into this mindset of trying to hunt down detections, what does good data look like for you?
It has to be there first off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another issue, and I know you guys don't charge based on this, which is, you know, another reason why I wanted to do this with you guys, because charging based on, you know, data volume, you lose out on so much. There's so many people that are like, well, I can only send you authentication data, or I can only send you data from my domain controller or this firewall or whatever, and that doesn't help anybody in IR. Right, you're gonna have so many gaps that's just terrible. So I think the biggest part is just the data is there. I'm a huge proponent of Sysmon. If you have, you know, Windows endpoints, it will save your life, I think, in most IR engagements. And I've actually been going through a bunch of our previous incidents at customers, and I would say earlier on, we didn't have people automatically install Sysmon or some logging, like we didn't make sure they had turned on. We just assumed they would do it. Now we just have them do it in the beginning when they onboard, because there was a lot of, oh, well, that sure they got ransomware, but of course we're not going to see it. We have zero data from that endpoint, or their one of their Azure accounts was breached, but we have zero authentication data, right? So
yeah, no, that's awesome. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, and that, like, to expand on sort of what you're saying there, Amanda, like that challenge of kind of, I guess, pushing customers, or they, from our perspective, they end up as victims, I guess, by the time we're kind of looking at them. But like that challenge of kind of pushing customers to go, all right, make a decision on how much data you want to hold, often also then skews how long they'll hold data for. And that just makes our job so much harder. Like they kind of go, all right, well, we'll take all the data sources, but we'll hold them for like 20 days, because that's like our cost cap on what we're holding in terms of data, which just like makes it challenging from our perspective when we're trying to investigate stuff.
Yeah, and storage is so cheap now.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days where we used to like lug around like a case full of drives.
Fair.
Yeah, like you show up to a customer site and be like, oh man, I hope I've got enough hard drives in this case to kind of capture all the evidence.
Right.
Whereas now you just like push data to like a storage bucket in one of the clouds, and it's like you just keep pushing data there. There's no kind of limit on that.
Yep.
Now, one of the flip sides to having all this data is you have a lot more that you're looking at, you have a lot more you're finding. And one thing we hear all the time is, dealing with this alert fatigue, or how do you actually prioritize alerts? So Josh, I know you have a few slides you want to show in a minute, but just kind of talking through abstractly, like how do you even begin to break down all these alerts? And, maybe what does an MDR team kind of look at? You log in for the day. How do you identify and prioritize which alerts you're actually going to look at and which ones you can respond to in a timely manner?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk a little bit about my background of where this came from, and I'm kind of keen to hear yours as well, Amanda, because if you're on the forensic side and then also the SIEM side, like you're kind of like in this prime spot of trying to really help defenders and incident responders. I guess the challenge I kind of saw is my background is predominantly doing incident response and digital forensics in terms of like the hands-on and operational side of things. So I kind of ended up in organizations where there were alerts being generated in a SIEM or in a case management solution, and there was just basically alerts getting poured in one after the other. So there was a team that would go and generate detections and kind of build what they thought were interesting things. And then that was kind of handed over to the responders to then go and investigate that and do work on it. And the challenge I saw more from my side as the person sort of at the coalface doing the response and the investigation work is that there was a bit of a disconnect between people crafting detections or crafting alerts and then the people actually doing the investigation work. So like there would be sort of people who were like creating these alerts and like, oh, we've created this really cool alert to detect port scanning on the external interfaces. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. I'm like, but I don't need to investigate that right now. Like that's a really low fidelity alert from the perspective of my side, where it's like someone has compromised or someone is inside the environment. Like that's kind of what your CSIRT or your incident response team are there for. Like they're there to help when things start to go wrong as part of it. So that was the challenge that I saw, is that there were people creating alerts and then there were people receiving them, and I was on the receiving side, and I was like, all right, I want better quality. Like I just want to know which things I should look at first and have those kind of like show up to the top. But like, what's your experience kind of been, Amanda, on that side?
Oh, definitely. Alert fatigue is probably the most common thing when anybody tries to implement their own SIEM, or they adopt one. They get to a place where it's been there and nobody's really been configuring it, because it takes a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
Right? We have an entire team dedicated to not just creating them, but like testing them in our own lab and against customer data. You don't have time to do that. Like even if you have a full person implementing a SIEM, like that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There are so many, like, we're a fairly new company, right? I think we're like year 5, but we really didn't get going until like year 2 anyways. And even after all that time, we're up to like, I don't know, 600 detections ish. And that's just like not close to everything. Our job will never be done, right? There's always new things coming.
That's right.
And you don't have time to have somebody just continually testing detections and maturing detections, and it's just so much work. Like, and to have that disconnect, like you talked about, where the person creating the detection really doesn't know maybe what the IR person needs. Like, they'll be, oh, this, I don't know, there's high vulnerabilities coming from this IPS. Everything that's a high in the IPS should be a high alert. In the no, it definitely should not be. And yeah, it's a big challenge to kind of show the difference in that method versus, oh, when the IIS process starts PowerShell, that you should know about that instantly.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's bad. Yeah. And I guess to kind of like simplify it down a little bit, like the example Amanda kind of gave there with like an IPS, like an intrusion protection system, sort of going, hey, there's this high alert that's just been triggered for this Linux vulnerability. And then you like kind of look at the alert and you go, oh yeah, but that's heading towards a Windows system. So that's not like you kind of have to take multiple factors in to determine how malicious something actually is. And that is challenging. That's not an easy thing to kind of do. So there is challenges in doing that. But when you look at it from an incident responder's perspective, it's like, why am I looking at this like high risk vulnerability, like exploit that's going in for a Linux system, and it's actually headed towards a Windows system? Like, that's going to go nowhere and do nothing.
Yep. No, and then you spent how much time looking into that to find out
Yeah, and in terms of kind of breaking down these different low-hanging fruits or trying to break down these more advanced threats, I do want to be mindful of time a little bit. So Josh, I want to share the screen.
Yeah, sure.
So Josh, you put together a few pieces of material, kind of around these different methods of parsing out and prioritizing vulnerabilities. I know you mentioned the cyber kill chain, maybe the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then you've actually kind of created your own. So I'm excited for you to talk through them all.
Yeah, so the concept behind this was me kind of going, all right, well, if there's this challenge of what the people writing detections are creating, and there's this disconnect between what the people at the end who are receiving these alerts are receiving, like, what can I kind of do to better communicate that to the people creating detections, or what can I kind of show them that will help them understand or create more interesting detections from my perspective? So I kind of took two well-known industry I guess frameworks. One is the Lockheed Martin, the cyber kill chain, which has been around for a very long time. And the reason I took this is it takes the concept of a life cycle of what a threat actor or what a compromise would look like, all the way from things like reconnaissance, which is where usually a threat actor starts, all the way through to the bottom there, which is actions on objectives. And the idea of actions on objectives can be fairly broad as well. But the concept being that this is the general life cycle that the majority of threat actors would take. And from my perspective as a responder, I need to focus on anything that's getting close to the bottom of that list. Like, that is bad news for the organization that we're trying to protect or that we're trying to look after. So if a threat actor is doing things like they've achieved their actions on objectives, and that could be exfiltrating data, or it could be ransomware networks, it could be kind of a number of things, or even if they're doing things like they've established command and control back to their command and control servers, those things from a responder's perspective need to be looked at now versus things like reconnaissance, which could be more things like port scanning or vulnerability scanning against the edge of your network. So I kind of took that. And then the other one as well is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And MITRE ATT&CK has been around for, again, a pretty long time now. And again, I was interested in how different techniques kind of occurred and where they kind of occurred again in that life cycle. So if we look at the far left-hand side, that is things like persistence, like how a threat actor basically maintains their foothold inside the environment. And then the far right-hand side is where you have things like collection, which could be collection of whatever the threat actor is after, and then things like exfiltration. And again, the concept being that the things on the far right are things I need to prioritize over the things on the left. Now, that's not to say that they're not all bad in some degree, but if I was looking at that from a responder's perspective, that's kind of where my focus should be in terms of alerts that I want to start to look at. So I took both of those two concepts, the kill chain and the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and I was like, all right, let me try to write this in kind of simple language to help people crafting alerts, and also to try to prioritize what different alerts are. So I kind of just came up with a simple high, medium, low, and a bit of a description around, like, if it's high, then it's something a threat actor should look at right now. And if it's low, it's something I should get to at some point in time. The other thing I kind of rolled into this as well, outside of the kill chain and the MITRE ATT&CK framework, was also the concept of a current vulnerability and also an unpatched system. So if there's a known vulnerability that is actively being used, and there's also the knowledge that a system is unpatched at the same time, then that is also highly critical. Like if we look at recent things like the Exchange vulnerabilities for on-prem Exchange systems, if that is occurring in the wild and your Exchange on-prem is unpatched, you need to look at alerts related to that today versus, again, kind of those lower alerts. So I tried to basically wrap those concepts together and kind of craft them together. But the challenge with this is that it does take the concept of correlating multiple things together. So the idea of essentially like that high one, if I sort of say like an alert that accurately detects 2 or more kill chain stages occurring as a result of the same origin, the idea being that if there's an alert that has detected a threat actor moving along that kill chain, that's bad news. That means that they're like slowly moving through their life cycle. And the same kind of applied for the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Like if we have an detection of 2 or more attack technique categories occurring, again, that kind of indicates the threat actor moving along their life cycle. And that's bad news. Like that's something that a responder needs to kind of get on top of as quickly as possible. And there's more detail there. I kind of wrote this up and made it public for everyone to go and use. But the idea behind it was to kind of generate discussion around how we prioritize alerts, but also to try to help the people writing detections to write detections that capture things like 2 or more stages of the kill chain, or 2 or more tactics in the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
But what you're talking about, like the dynamic nature of these threats, it is difficult to capture all that in a single matrix. Something that falls on a certain stage of the kill chain might actually be a higher priority on the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. So kind of balancing these different ways of evaluating a threat is really important. And there's a few ways to do that. Josh, I know you've kind of set up a quick little walkthrough of some actual detections that we've had. So I'm really excited for you to get hands-on and share a few of the things that excite you there.
Yeah, sure. So what I'll share, just so everyone kind of understands what you're looking at here, is just part of the Uptycs platform itself. So what you're looking at here is detections, and the idea behind this is it takes a correlation of events and kind of pulls them together, and then basically tries to score those to give you that indication of, all right, should I take a look at this, and how high priority is it? And I thought I'd just kind of show the concept of what I just talked about, which was all theory, and that was all kind of developed out. I think I published that blog post before I started Uptycs. So it was very much kind of taken from the perspective of what I thought should be done from a responder's perspective. But I do also like that a lot of those concepts kind of already exist in the Uptycs platform as well. So this is kind of a look at some simple detections, and I'll kind of just pull up 2 and talk about them really quickly. This is one which is a Mimikatz detection. So basically, what the end result of what you're seeing here is Mimikatz, which is a credential theft type application, or basically a credential dumping tool to enable a threat actor to steal credentials and then kind of continue to use them. But one thing that we try to do inside the Uptycs platform is, one, kind of show you like a kind of grayed out version of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, so you can kind of see really quickly how far along that MITRE ATT&CK matrix that this detection has all these different signals or all these different events from. And then what we've tried to do is score these different events together and basically try to produce a score behind that. So Uptycs has kind of pushed the concept of what I kind of had there a little bit further, where they've actually said, all right, different types of events inside of that attack matrix kind of are less important or more important. To sort of Amanda's point, like someone turns on the camera or the microphone, like all 3 of us are generating those events right now. and it's hopefully not malicious in terms of what we're doing as part of it. But those things could be like really low fidelity and just be general noise in the background. So the idea behind what the Uptycs platform tries to do is basically score those out and then generate an overall score related to those as part of it. Not only that, then what we also try to do is give people the ability to also kind of alter that score if they wanted to. So if they wanted to go into some of the pre-made rules that we had, or if you want to go and make your own rules as well, you could go and do that fairly easily and actually look at, all right, well, Mimikatz execution detection, although it might be rated on its own as a 4, you could wind that up or you could wind that down, kind of depending on how interesting or how malicious or benign that might be inside your organization. And to kind of, I guess, this is kind of a pretty simple Mimikatz one where we're seeing sort of PowerShell spawn out something touching the location where our secrets are held in Windows, and then Mimikatz getting executed and the detections for those. But to kind of show something a little bit more complex, I guess, it sort of spans multiple parts of that MITRE ATT&CK framework. I thought I'd pull up another detection which has quite a few signals in it. So this one kind of has a little over 800 different events that kind of all correlated together for this kind of malicious action occurring as part of it. And this then kind of means that all those individual events together are all being tied into this one detection. So I can kind of see, hopefully, pretty simplistically, around what might be occurring as part of this event and kind of see detail around those as well with what's actually going on. And in this case, it's someone using a kind of pretty well-known, I guess, exploitation framework called Power Up or Powersploit, which allows them to basically try to elevate privileges on a Windows system as well. But again, this is kind of a nice tie-in of kind of saying, all right, how far along that MITRE ATT&CK framework have they gotten? And I can kind of see that they're all the way at the end here with doing exfiltration potentially, and there's some command and control and a bunch of the other ones in that framework as well.
This is awesome. One of the things that I always like to highlight about this is it kind of goes back to the point that we were talking about earlier around having the right type of data. And having this constant always on sensor is really important to capture, the socket event data, the process event data that helps you really break down all these signals and give not just what happened when, but the context around it to be able to take action. So I really enjoy having this depth of telemetry here, Josh. This is wonderful.
Yeah, it's super handy to kind of see this all kind of pulled together nice and simple, and kind of also like laid out relatively simplistically as well, so that you can kind of say, all right, tell me the story of what has occurred here, which as a responder, that's always what I'm after. Like, I want to know what the threat actor has done so I can hopefully start to predict what they might try to do next as part of their actions.
This is wonderful. Well, I do want to be mindful of time as well. So, Josh, I'm happy to kind of take back the screen and then open it up.
Go for it.
I have seen a couple questions come in, so I'll go ahead and ask the first one now. I'll ask it to both of you guys, and I'd love to get both of your thoughts on it. But the first one here, with how fast threat actors are moving, can you expand a bit in terms of the speed of going from prevention to remediation faster? Maybe to kind of rephrase that a little bit, how do we view kind of the benefits of, say, like automated blocking and remediation techniques? Like, how do we really speed up the time to react to these incidents and threats? Josh, you want to go first? And
yeah, sure. I'll
Amanda, you'll go first on the next one.
Okay, all right.
I'll tee you up.
I guess that speed from detection to reaction is super important. Like the two alerts that I was kind of or the detections I was showing then, like if you see someone using Mimikatz, that's bad news. That's not someone just like doing something which is, it's not even sort of the gray area of, oh, this could be benign, this could be malicious. Like if you're seeing things like a well-known credential dumping tool getting executed, like you need to stop that. like things are going bad in a big way if you kind of seen that inside the environment. And I think moving from this concept of detection to reaction is super important with just how fast threat actors are moving now. I mean, like winding the clock back, some of the cases I've worked on in the past where we used to see nation state threat actors who were, and still are, highly skilled and fast at what they do. Like you'd see them get into an environment and they knew what they were doing. Like they had a play-by-play of the actions that they were taking, and they moved fast in the environment. But the challenge now is that our are kind of more simplistic organized crime groups online are doing the same techniques. Like they are moving just as fast. Like we see ransomware threat actors come in and execute scripts which just run through and automate the sort of discovery of sensitive content if they're trying to do extortion, and then also the discovery of the environment, like understanding where the domain controllers are and how to elevate them. And you need to find ways to shut that down as quickly as possible. So being able to take a detection through to prevention is super important. And having something like some sort of platform like what I was showing you there in Uptycs, you can actually put in what are called remediation actions in place. So if a Mimikatz detection goes off, you can enforce it to do things like block that process from running straight away. Or you could do things like go, all right, I want to block that process, disable that user, and isolate that box now. And you can do it all in kind of one hit. And I think that's important for defenders to be able to start to catch up and be able to get on track on top of these threat actors as they're moving through an environment.
Yeah, if you think about all the automation that threat actors are doing, you have to automate to keep up with it, right? You can't just, all right, I now know that Mimikatz was run. Let me remote in and kill that process, or let me do what, like manually go in, log into my portal, isolate that host, log into the other portal, reset the user password, call the user. Like you can't do that and expect to get ahead of anything, when everything else is automated from the other side.
Yeah. Well, usually it's like, let's log in and try to stop that process. You're like, oh, look, there are all the credentials that got dumped out. I was like,
right.
All right, if I can see that, the threat actor's definitely got it now.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for answering that one. The second question that I saw come in, Amanda, this is actually perfect for you with the detection engineering background. So the question's asking about the importance of flexibility and customization when it comes to threat hunting in these environments. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on how important it is to be flexible and be able to write prescriptive rules and kind of maybe your own enjoyment in writing rules themselves.
Yeah, that's one of my, I don't want to say favorite things to do, because that means somebody's gotten they've had a compromise, but I do enjoy going back and saying, all right, well, we detected all of this stuff, but it's a numbers game, right? Like you should detect as many possible things as you can, because you never know which pieces and parts an attacker's gonna go for, right? So just finding every little bit of IOC that you possibly can to see if you can create a higher fidelity detection, even lower fidelity. Sometimes, just reports come out of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's always good to look at those kind of things, as well as I love tabletops. So you were talking, Josh, about doing like other stuff on the side. That's what my training is. It's like tabletops and IR playbooks and stuff. And I always tell people to use that, right? Go through, run a playbook, run a tabletop on what keeps you up at night, what keeps your devs up at night, your admins, whatever, and create those as detections, right? You can really use that as a way to come up with other ideas.
Yeah, and I guess also to add to that, or maybe prompt you a little bit more, but even the concept of taking a detection and tuning that to the organization that's inside it as well. Like it's not as simple nowadays to go, all right, here are my 600 or 1000 detections. I'll just overlay them on top of like a new organization. Right. Like people do unusual things inside of environments. Like, oh gosh, yeah, like some organizations are okay with giving local admin to people and allowing them to use PowerShell to do lots of crazy things.
I was just going to mention PowerShell. Yeah. One of the detections I thought was absolutely great until we started getting a lot of customers was detecting on PowerShell execution bypass. I'm like, oh, like I did all this in the lab. It works against, at the time we had like 30 customers. Like it works across everybody. This is great. And we started getting more people rolling in. I'm like, oh, this is bad. People are doing some really, really bad stuff with PowerShell. We can't do that anymore. So yeah, tuning that, like, oh, anytime a script runs out of this directory or this user or whatever, is definitely needed.
Yeah, and I think getting that tuning just right inside an organization, like that's kind of what then makes for some really good detections and some really like thorough alerts in terms of what you're, or at least what I'm kind of from my side keen to see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys both so much for joining us. I know we ran a couple minutes long, but it's only in the name of some good experiences and good war stories being shared. So I really do appreciate it. I'm excited to have you guys on again, maybe sometime soon, who knows? But I really feel like you gave us a really strong understanding of kind of not only what is digital forensics, but some of the pain points and how to address them as we're trying to shift from these traditional on-prem environments into these more cloud-focused environments, and really get keen on how we capture our data, how do we store it, and how do we parse through all of the signals and noise that comes out of that haystack. So thank you so much for joining us. Amanda, thank you so much to Blumira for joining us. We're really excited to be collaborating with you right now and just kind of hear your thoughts and background and everything. So those of you who joined us this month, thank you so much. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to myself, to Josh, to Amanda directly. We love talking about this, and we'll be happy to do it another time. So thank you so much.